Hey, it's Chuck Carstensen, Carstensen Team Remax Results, and welcome back for the Credit Genius video series, video number 12, where we're talking about how to deal with collectors and collection companies when it comes to bills and your credit. And there's a couple main points you're going to want to find out in this and watch for. One is you don't want to validate what they are asking for, and number two is you don't want to ignore their calls. A lot of times, maybe if you've had credit problems, you start to ignore their calls. That's not good. So listen and watch this video to find out why.
Hello, and welcome back to the Credit Genius U Credit Education Series. By now, you should have a fairly deep understanding of the 4 core components that make up your FICO score and what you need to do to affect each area of your credit in a positive way. You should also have a clear understanding of the fastest way to increase your credit score through the use of revolving credit accounts and your responsibilities when it comes to managing all of your credit accounts to achieve a squeaky clean credit history. For the next 4 videos, we are going to focus on some of the more mechanical challenges faced when dealing with both derogatory and positive credit transactions. In this week's episode, we are going to cover how to deal with uncomfortable collection calls and why you should never, ever hide from collectors. Getting a call from a creditor or collection company for a debt that is past due can be very uncomfortable and nerve-wracking to say the least. For this reason, it can be very easy to ignore the phone calls or written communication in hopes that the communication will stop and the debt will go away. Unfortunately, it just doesn't work this way. In fact, the only thing you accomplish by ignoring these communications is to make the problem worse. When you ignore the communications, the collections process keeps moving forward without your input, and most likely the debt is continuing to accrue late fees and interest charges that can add up to hundreds or even thousands of dollars more than you originally owed. So what should you do when you receive a collection communication? Good question. First, let's start with what you should not do. You should not engage in something known as debt validation for any reason. Debt validation simply means anything that you say which admits liability for that debt on your part. So we recommend skipping all of the stories about why the debt was late or pleas for leniency. In the end, all you are doing is validating the debt, and this is usually happening on a recorded call. This gives the creditor or collector more ammunition if they should choose to take the debt to court later. So what should you do? Well, you should absolutely make sure the collector or creditor has the right person first and foremost. You can do this by having them verify the full name and address they have for you on file. Also, by verifying your correct and current address and correcting any false information they have, you will now ensure that any communication they send by mail reaches you. This is extremely important. One of the number 1 complaints we hear from clients in the credit repair process is that they didn't even know about a debt, and yet it made it all the way to a courtroom, where the collector usually won the case by default, and a judge put a judgment on the credit report. These judgments can stay on your credit report for up to 10 years, depending on what the judgment is for. More often than not, the reason this happened is because the collector mailed something to an old address for you, because you didn't take the time to make sure they had your current and accurate address and other contact information. Once you ensure all of the information they have is correct, you can do some research into what your rights are, or you can talk to your credit repair specialist or legal advisor. And in many cases, you may have the legal rights to fight back against a portion of the debt or maybe even the entire debt. But you won't know any of this if you ignore the communications in the first place. Once again, the most important thing to remember is to never validate the debt in any way. You are not required to do this by law, and in most cases, it will hold no value when it comes to disputing a debt or defending your consumer rights. On a final note, we absolutely recommend that before you agree to anything with a collector or creditor regarding any past due debt, that you first speak with your credit repair specialist or legal counsel to get the best advice in your pursuit of protecting your consumer rights. And please remember, this video is not legal advice, and you need to seek out your own legal counsel before making any final decisions. Well, that's all for this week's episode. We will see you here next week for another episode of the Credit Genius U Credit Education Series, where we will be talking about what you should do if you're summoned to court for a past due debt. Until then, thanks for watching, and remember that with a little bit of work and our help, you too can be a credit genius.